If you were driving down a highway and suddenly witnessed an act of unimaginable cruelty happening right before your eyes, would you have the courage to act? Prepare yourself for an absolutely shocking story of callousness, quick thinking, and the incredible resilience of one remarkable cat who survived what should have been impossible. This isn't just a rescue story. It's a testament to how a split-second decision can make the difference between life and death. On the busy Interstate 75 just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, where cars regularly speed past at 70 miles per hour, a moment of senseless cruelty became the catalyst for an extraordinary chain of events. Witnesses would later describe the incident as something out of a nightmare. So horrifying was what happened on that sunny Tuesday afternoon when a grey sedan with tinted windows pulled alongside a blue pickup truck, both vehicles traveling at highway speeds. Mia Collins, a 29-year-old nurse, was driving home after a grueling 12-hour shift at Grady Memorial Hospital. The spring weather had been perfect, so she had her windows down slightly, enjoying the breeze as she mentally decompressed from the emotional weight of her job in the trauma unit. She had seen plenty of human suffering, but nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to witness on her commute home. The cat, later named Miracle, was a small orange tabby with striking green eyes and a distinctive white patch on his chest. No one knew where he had come from, or how he had ended up in the possession of someone capable of such cruelty. All that was certain was that one moment he was inside a vehicle, and the next he was airborne above the highway, thrown like a piece of trash from one moving car toward another in what appeared to be some twisted game or dare. Jeremy Rodriguez had been driving his pickup truck in the middle lane, his work tools secured in the bed, a country music station playing quietly on the radio. At 34, the construction foreman was used to long days and careful attention to safety, skills that would be tested in ways he never imagined when he noticed a grey sedan approaching quickly in his side mirror, the driver making strange hand gestures out the window. Across the highway, Officer Elaine Winters was parked in a speed trap monitoring traffic, her radar gun pointed at the steady flow of vehicles. At 47, the highway patrol veteran had ticketed countless speeders and responded to hundreds of accidents over her 20-year career. Yet this ordinary Tuesday was about to present her with one of the most bizarre and disturbing cases she'd ever encounter. The city of Atlanta sprawled in the background, its skyline visible in the distance as cars flowed along the interstate like blood through arteries, carrying people to and from their daily lives. Few of these commuters paid much attention to their surroundings, locked in their own thoughts about dinner plans, work deadlines, or family responsibilities. None could have predicted the shocking drama about to unfold in their midst. That afternoon, the traffic was moving steadily despite the usual congestion. The weather was clear, visibility excellent, which meant that what happened next was witnessed with perfect clarity by at least a dozen drivers, their testimonies later forming a consistent account of an act so callous it defied comprehension. Cell phones would capture fragments of the aftermath, but the initial moment of cruelty happened too quickly for anyone to record. The man who threw the cat moved with deliberate intent, the investigation would later reveal. The grey sedan had been following Jeremy's truck for nearly a mile, matching his speed, positioning itself perfectly alongside. The driver appeared to be communicating with someone on a phone, laughing as he held something squirming against the steering wheel with one hand, something orange and clearly distressed. Lisa Parker, a high school teacher commuting home with a stack of essays to grade, was 2 cars behind the grey sedan. Her dashcam, installed after a minor fender bender the previous year, was recording as events unfolded. Though the footage wouldn't capture the actual throw with perfect clarity, it would become crucial evidence in the subsequent investigation and in the story that would soon grip the nation's attention. The highway that day was like any other in America, a neutral ground where strangers passed each other at high speeds, sealed in their private bubbles, connected only by the shared rules of the road and a basic assumption of safety and civility. It was this unspoken social contract that was about to be shattered, leaving witnesses shocked and a small orange cat fighting for his life in circumstances that defied probability. Meanwhile, in the passenger seat of a minivan 3 lanes over, 12-year-old Zachary Bennett was recording a video blog about his baseball team's recent victory. His mother, Diane, focused on driving, was only half listening to her son's excited recounting of the game-winning play. Neither realized they were about to become part of a story that would go viral within hours, their ordinary family moment interrupted by an extraordinary act of cruelty and the even more extraordinary response it would trigger. Connor Wilson, a truck driver with 20 years of experience hauling goods across the country, had seen plenty of dangerous and stupid behavior on America's highways. At 56, he prided himself on his spotless driving record and his ability to anticipate and avoid trouble on the road. In his side mirror, he noticed the grey sedan weaving slightly, its driver seeming distracted. Years of intuition told Connor to create distance between his 18-wheeler and whatever was happening in that car. Caroline Reed, a veterinarian whose small animal practice was located just 2 exits down the highway, was returning from a house call with her medical kit still in the trunk. At 38, she had treated thousands of animals, from routine checkups to emergency surgeries. She could never have imagined that her drive home that day would call upon every bit of her medical expertise in the most unlikely of settings, the shoulder of Interstate 75, with cars rushing past at deadly speeds. As the clock struck 4:37 p.m., these strangers, Mia, Jeremy, Officer Winters, Lisa, the Bennetts, Connor, and Dr. Reed, remained unaware of how their lives were about to intersect through the fate of one small cat. Their different skills, perspectives, and choices in the next few moments would create a chain of response that would mean the difference between life and death. The stage was set for both the worst and the best of humanity to reveal itself on an ordinary stretch of highway on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. The windows of the grey sedan rolled down further as it pulled parallel to Jeremy's pickup truck. Mia, 1 car behind and slightly to the left, noticed the driver's arm extending out the window, holding something that appeared to be struggling. Her medical brain registered the odd tableau before her emotional brain could process what she was seeing. A young man with a backward baseball cap gripping a clearly terrified orange cat by the scruff of its neck, dangling the animal out the window at 70 miles per hour. Time seemed to slow as the unthinkable occurred. With a casual flick of his wrist, as if discarding a cigarette butt, the man in the sedan launched the cat through the air, directly toward the open bed of Jeremy's pickup truck. A collective gasp rose from those close enough to witness the act, a small orange body tumbling through open air above the speeding highway. Mia's hands tightened on her steering wheel, her medical training suddenly useless in the face of such deliberate cruelty. Jeremy felt rather than saw something land in his truck bed. The slight shift in weight was barely perceptible, but the honking from cars around him drew his attention to his rearview mirror, where he could see people gesturing wildly toward the back of his vehicle. Confused, he began to slow down, checking his side mirrors for any signs of trouble. The grey sedan was already accelerating away, weaving through traffic with reckless speed. Those precious first seconds were chaos on the highway. Mia immediately hit her hazard lights and began honking, trying desperately to get Jeremy's attention. Lisa Parker, behind them both, was already dialing 911, her voice shaking as she reported what she'd just witnessed. "I'm on I-75 northbound just past exit 247, she told the dispatcher, her words tumbling out in shocked disbelief. "Someone just threw a cat from a moving car into another moving vehicle. The cat is in the back of a blue pickup truck. Please send help." Officer Winters, who had been watching traffic flow through her radar gun, noticed the sudden disruption in the pattern. Hazard lights, a vehicle slowing, others swerving slightly to avoid it. Years of experience told her something was wrong, before her radio crackled with the dispatcher's alert. She was already pulling out from her position, lights activated but siren still silent, as she maneuvered toward the developing situation, her brain cycling through possible scenarios, but never once landing on what had actually occurred. Jeremy finally understood something was wrong when Mia managed to pull alongside him, her window down, shouting and pointing frantically to the bed of his truck. "There's a cat. Someone threw a cat in your truck." The words made no sense to him at first. How could there be a cat in his truck? He had been driving for miles. Instinctively, he began to pull toward the shoulder, checking his mirrors to ensure he could stop safely. In the bed of the pickup, Miracle was living up to the name he would soon be given. The small orange tabby had somehow survived being thrown between vehicles at highway speeds, landing among Jeremy's secured tools. Disoriented and terrified, the cat had wedged himself between a toolbox and the side of the truck bed, his body frozen in shock, pupils dilated to black pools in his green eyes. The wind whipped his fur as the truck began to slow, each movement sending fresh waves of terror through his traumatized body. Officer Winters arrived as Jeremy's truck came to a complete stop on the shoulder. Her cruiser's lights created a protective barrier from passing traffic as she approached cautiously, still unaware of exactly what had transpired. Mia had already parked her own car and was rushing toward the pickup, her nurse's instinct to help overriding any concern for her own safety on the busy highway shoulder. "Ma'am, please stay back," Officer Winters called out, her hand instinctively moving toward her holster in the face of an unknown situation. Mia stopped, hands raised slightly to show she meant no harm. "I'm a nurse," she explained quickly. "There's a cat in the truck bed. Someone threw it from another car. The cat might be injured." The officer's expression shifted from cautious authority to disbelief as the words registered. Meanwhile, Jeremy had exited his vehicle and was staring into the bed of his truck with an expression of horror. "Holy shit," he muttered, spotting the trembling orange form wedged among his tools. "There really is a cat back here." He turned to Officer Winters, his face pale with shock. "I didn't do this. I had no idea it was there until she told me." He gestured toward Mia, who was now approaching slowly, her focus entirely on the terrified animal. More vehicles had pulled over, creating an impromptu audience for the unfolding drama. Lisa Parker approached with her phone in hand, the dashcam footage already queued up. "I got it on video," she told Officer Winters, her voice still shaking. "Not the clearest shot, but you can see the guy throw something from his car and I got a partial plate." Zachary Bennett was recording again, his young voice providing breathless commentary as his mother tried to keep him from getting too close to the highway. Dr. Reed spotted the gathering on the shoulder as she drove past, the flashing lights of the police cruiser and the cluster of people near a pickup truck triggering her professional curiosity. Seeing what appeared to be some kind of accident scene, she made a quick decision to pull over and offer assistance. As a veterinarian, she had stopped at roadside emergencies before, usually to help with injured wildlife. She had no idea that her expertise was about to be desperately needed. Connor Wilson, the truck driver, also pulled his rig over a safe distance ahead, his CB radio already broadcasting a warning to other truckers about the situation developing on the shoulder. As he walked back toward the scene, his weathered face hardened at the story that quickly spread from person to person. In his decades on the road, he had seen plenty of roadkill and occasional wildlife rescues, but never had he encountered such deliberate animal cruelty. "We need to get the cat secured before trying to move it," Dr. Reed announced as she joined the group, her veterinary credentials immediately shifting the dynamics of the situation. "It's likely in shock and could be injured. Any sudden movements might cause it to bolt into traffic." She retrieved a towel and a small carrier from her car, her calm professionalism creating a center of gravity around which the chaotic scene began to organize itself. Officer Winters was simultaneously managing the growing crowd, radioing in the description and partial plate number of the gray sedan and documenting the scene. Her bodycam recorded as Dr. Reed and Mia carefully approached the truck bed, their movements slow and deliberate. "I've got units looking for the vehicle," she informed the group. "Animal cruelty is a felony in Georgia, especially something this deliberate and dangerous." The turning point came when Dr. Reed, moving with the practiced patience of someone used to dealing with terrified animals, managed to position herself at the edge of the truck bed. "Everyone please stay very quiet," she instructed, her voice barely above a whisper. The small crowd fell silent, even young Zachary lowering his phone as he sensed the gravity of the moment. Only the rush of passing traffic provided a backdrop to the tense scene as the veterinarian slowly extended her hand toward the trembling orange form wedged among the tools. "Hey there, little one," Dr. Reed murmured, keeping her body language open and non-threatening. Miracle's green eyes, wide with terror, remained fixed on her approaching hand. His tiny body pressed so tightly against the truck bed that he seemed to be trying to melt into the metal itself. Mia stood ready with the towel, her nurse's training giving her a steadiness that complemented Dr. Reed's expertise. Together, they represented this frightened creature's best chance at survival. What happened next would later be described by witnesses as nothing short of miraculous. Instead of retreating further, or lashing out in fear as many traumatized animals might, the small orange tabby inched forward ever so slightly, his nose extending to cautiously sniff Dr. Reed's outstretched fingers. The movement was minimal, barely perceptible to the onlookers holding their breath in anticipation. But to those who understood animal behavior, it represented an extraordinary leap of trust from a creature who had just experienced the ultimate betrayal. "That's it, Doctor," Reed encouraged, her voice maintaining that same gentle tone. "You're safe now." The cat's ears, which had been flattened against his head in fear, twitched forward slightly at the sound of her voice. Something in her manner, perhaps the confidence of someone who had handled thousands of frightened animals, or perhaps something more intangible, was breaking through Miracle's terror, creating a tiny opening for trust to begin. With exquisite patience, Dr. Reed continued this delicate dance of building trust, allowing the cat to become accustomed to her presence and scent before making any attempt to touch him. Minutes passed, feeling like hours to the bystanders watching in hushed anticipation. Traffic continued to rush by, but on the shoulder of I-75, time seemed to have slowed to accommodate this fragile moment of connection forming between rescuer and rescued. When Dr. Reed finally made contact, the lightest touch of fingers against orange fur, Miracle flinched but didn't retreat. This small victory elicited a collective sigh of relief from the onlookers. "Mia, get ready with the towel," Dr. Reed whispered. "When I lift him, move in quickly but gently." The nurse nodded, positioning herself for the coordinated rescue attempt. Jeremy stood nearby, his truck providing the stage for this unlikely drama, his tools inadvertently creating the shelter that had kept the cat from tumbling out onto the highway. In one fluid motion, practiced through years of handling frightened animals, Dr. Reed gently scooped Miracle from his hiding place. The cat's body tensed, but remarkably, he didn't struggle or try to escape her hold. Mia immediately moved in with the towel, helping to wrap the trembling animal in a secure cocoon that would prevent any sudden escapes while providing comfort and warmth to a body now trembling with shock rather than just fear. "He's not fighting," Dr. Reed noted with professional surprise, cradling the towel-wrapped bundle against her chest. Most cats in such circumstances would be scratching, biting, doing anything to escape the handling of strangers after such trauma. Yet Miracle seemed to have made some instinctual calculation that these humans represented safety rather than further threat. It was as if, having survived the unimaginable, he had exhausted his capacity for fear and found himself surrendering to whatever came next. A small crowd now gathered around Dr. Reed as she carefully conducted an initial assessment. With gentle hands, she palpated the small body through the towel, feeling for obvious injuries. "His breathing is rapid but steady," she reported to the attentive faces surrounding her. "No obvious broken bones that I can feel, but he'll need X-rays to be sure. The fact that he's conscious and alert is a very good sign." Her cautious optimism spread through the group like a ripple, faces relaxing slightly from their masks of concern. Meanwhile, Officer Winters received a radio update that electrified the gathering. "Units have located a vehicle matching the description heading north on I-285, she announced, stepping slightly away from the group to respond to her radio. "Partial plate matches, they're moving to intercept." A murmur of satisfaction passed through the witnesses. The thought that those responsible might be caught added a sense of justice to the unfolding rescue story. Dr. Reed continued her examination, carefully parting the towel to check Miracle's eyes, ears, and mouth. "His pupils are responsive," she noted, though he's clearly in shock. The cat remained surprisingly still in her experienced hands, occasionally blinking slowly, a gesture that cat owners recognize as a sign of trust or contentment, and one that seemed extraordinary given the circumstances. This small orange tabby, who minutes ago had been airborne above a highway, was now the center of a circle of concern formed by complete strangers, united by their horror at his treatment and their determination to help him. Jeremy, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward with an unexpected offer. "My sister runs a cat rescue out of her home," he said, his voice still carrying traces of the shock he'd experienced. "It's about 20 minutes from here. She'd know what to do, who to call." The construction foreman, who had started his day expecting nothing more dramatic than a routine drive home, now found himself an integral part of a rescue operation that had formed spontaneously around his truck. Officer Winters rejoined the group, her face serious but with a hint of satisfaction. "They've got the car," she confirmed. "2 males in their 20s. They're being detained now." She paused, then added with professional restraint that didn't quite mask her personal feelings, "The driver is claiming it was just a joke. Says they found the cat in a parking lot and thought it would be funny to—" She trailed off, unwilling to repeat the callous explanation in front of the visibly protective group that had formed around the animal. The news that the perpetrators had been caught sparked a fresh wave of discussion among the bystanders. Lisa was already uploading her dashcam footage to a cloud drive to share with authorities. Connor, the truck driver, was offering his own statement as a witness. Young Zachary, though excited about the drama, was being gently shepherded back to their car by his mother, who felt the situation was becoming too intense for her son. Throughout this flurry of activity, Dr. Reed remained focused solely on her patient, her hands gentle and sure as she continued her assessment. "We need to get him to a veterinary hospital," she finally announced. "He seems stable for transport, but I want him thoroughly examined and monitored for internal injuries that might not be immediately apparent." She looked at Officer Winters. "I can take him to my clinic. It's just 2 exits down. We have emergency facilities and can keep him overnight for observation." The decisiveness in her voice created an immediate consensus. Dr. Reed was clearly the right person to take charge of Miracle's care. 3 days after the highway incident, Miracle lay in a comfortable recovery bed at Paws and Claws Veterinary Clinic, his condition upgraded from critical to stable. The tiny orange tabby had survived against all odds, not just the horrifying throw between moving vehicles, but also the internal bruising and mild concussion that Dr. Reed had diagnosed upon his arrival at the clinic. When the news crew from Atlanta's Channel 7 arrived to do a follow-up story, they found not a frightened, traumatized animal, but a cat who blinked slowly at the camera and accepted gentle pets from the veterinary staff with surprising equanimity. "His recovery has been remarkable," Dr. Reed told the reporter, her professional demeanor softening as she stroked Miracle's orange fur. "Initially, we were concerned about internal bleeding and neurological damage, but the X-rays and ultrasounds showed no severe injuries. What she didn't elaborate on was the hours she had spent monitoring him through that first critical night, sleeping on the clinic couch between checks, watching for any signs of deterioration that would require emergency intervention. For reasons she couldn't fully explain even to herself, this particular patient had affected her deeply. Outside the clinic, public interest in Miracle's story had exploded. Lisa Parker's dashcam footage, combined with additional video from Zachary Bennett's phone, had gone viral overnight, amassing millions of views and thousands of comments expressing outrage at the cruelty and amazement at the cat's survival. The story had been picked up by national news outlets, and the clinic's phone lines were jammed with calls from people across the country wanting to help with medical expenses or offer the cat a permanent home. Mia Collins had created a fundraising page for Miracle's medical care, expecting perhaps a few $100s in donations. Within 48 hours, the campaign had raised over $30,000, with contributions pouring in from as far away as Australia and Japan. "People are desperate for stories with happy endings," Mia explained when interviewed about the campaign's success. "In a world full of bad news, Miracle gives them something to believe in, the idea that sometimes, against all odds, the vulnerable can survive and even thrive." While the world followed Miracle's recovery through social media updates and news segments, the legal case against his abusers was proceeding with unusual speed. The district attorney, responding to the public outcry, had personally taken an interest in the case. The driver and passenger of the gray sedan, identified as brothers Tyler and Brendan Morris, ages 24 and 22, were facing felony animal cruelty charges, with additional charges of reckless endangerment due to the danger their actions had posed to motorists on the highway. On the 5th day of Miracle's hospitalization, Jeremy Rodriguez came to visit, bringing a small cat bed and toys donated by his sister's rescue organization. The construction foreman had been profoundly affected by his unwitting role in the drama. "I keep thinking about what could have happened," he told Dr. Reed as they watched Miracle cautiously inspect the new bed. "If he'd fallen differently, if I'd been in a different lane. It's just crazy how many things had to go exactly right for him to survive." Dr. Reed understood exactly what Jeremy meant. In her years of veterinary practice, she had seen plenty of miracle cases, animals who survived against medical probability through some combination of resilience and circumstance that defied easy explanation. But Miracle's case was different, not just because of the dramatic circumstances of his rescue, but because of the way he seemed to have emerged from trauma with an extraordinary capacity for trust. Despite what humans had done to him, he approached each new person at the clinic with cautious curiosity rather than fear. The staff at Paws and Claws had all fallen under Miracle's spell. Technicians took their breaks in the recovery room, offering gentle pets and quiet conversation. Reception staff checked on him between appointments, bringing tiny treats approved by Dr. Reed's careful recovery diet. Even the clinic's therapy dog, a gentle golden retriever named Charlie, who visited patients recovering from surgery, had developed a special relationship with the cat, often lying protectively beside his recovery bed during his scheduled visits. 1 week after the incident, Dr. Reed made a decision that surprised even herself. After finishing her evening rounds and ensuring that all patients were stable for the night, she sat alone with Miracle in the dimly lit recovery room. "I wasn't looking for another cat," she told him softly, stroking the fur that was beginning to regain its luster under proper care. "But sometimes the animal chooses you," the orange tabby responded by stretching out a paw to touch her hand, a gesture so deliberate it seemed to seal an unspoken agreement between them. The news that Dr. Reed was adopting Miracle spread quickly through the network of people who had become invested in his story. Officer Winters stopped by the clinic on her day off, bringing a sturdy carrier as a homecoming gift. Mia visited during her break from the hospital, taking photos to update the thousands of followers, now tracking Miracle's progress online. Even Connor Wilson, the truck driver, called the clinic from the road to express his approval when he heard the news. The transition from clinic to home was planned with the careful consideration that Dr. Reed brought to all aspects of her practice. Her apartment was prepared with all the essentials a recovering cat might need: quiet spaces to retreat, comfortable perches near windows, toys to provide stimulation during his continued recovery. The excess funds from the donation campaign would be directed toward establishing a special fund at the clinic for treating animals whose owners couldn't afford emergency care. On the day Miracle finally went home with Dr. Reed, a small gathering took place in the clinic parking lot. Jeremy brought flowers and a handmade card from his sister's children. Lisa Parker arrived with a photo album documenting the highway rescue through images captured from her dashcam footage. Young Zachary Bennett, accompanied by his mother, presented a drawing of Miracle wearing what appeared to be a superhero cape. The impromptu celebration marked not just the cat's remarkable physical recovery, but the community that had formed around him. As weeks turned into months, Miracle continued to thrive in Dr. Reed's care. His physical wounds healed completely, leaving only a slight limp in his right front paw that emerged when he was tired. The psychological healing was more complicated, but equally impressive. Though he still startled at sudden movements and remained wary of open windows, he had developed a confidence that amazed everyone who knew his history. Videos of him playing, purring, and engaging in typical cat antics became regular features on the social media account Dr. Reed had created to satisfy public interest in his progress. The court case against the Morris brothers concluded with a result that satisfied Miracle's supporters. Both men received jail time along with substantial fines and were ordered to complete community service at an animal shelter upon release. More significantly, the case led to discussions in the Georgia legislature about strengthening animal cruelty laws, with several representatives citing Miracle's story in their arguments for tougher penalties. What had begun as a single act of senseless cruelty was transforming into a catalyst for systemic change. For Dr. Reed, the most profound change was in her daily life. The veterinarian who had once lived alone, focused almost exclusively on her practice, now returned home each evening to an orange tabby who greeted her at the door with a chirping meow. Her apartment, previously organized with minimalist precision, now featured cat toys scattered across the floor and a custom window perch where Miracle spent hours watching the world outside. Photographs of the two of them began appearing alongside her professional certifications on her office wall. 1 year after the highway incident, a special ceremony was held at the newly established Miracle's Second Chance Animal Sanctuary on the outskirts of Atlanta. The orange tabby himself, now a healthy and confident adult cat, sat regally on a custom-built perch as the mayor cut the ribbon to officially open the facility, funded largely by donations inspired by his story. Cameras flashed and reporters jostled for position as Dr. Reed, her normally reserved professional demeanor softened by pride, stood beside her famous feline companion who had become the symbol of animal resilience across the country. Miracle wore a special harness for the occasion, custom-made in bright orange with reflective trim that caught the sunlight. The harness served a dual purpose. It kept him secure during public appearances, but it also covered the small bare patch on his chest, where fur had never fully regrown after his injuries. Most remarkably, he showed no signs of stress amid the crowd and commotion, his green eyes calm and attentive as he surveyed the humans who had gathered to celebrate a story of cruelty transformed into compassion. Among the attendees were the key figures from that fateful day on I-75. Jeremy Rodriguez had taken time off from his construction job to attend, bringing his sister and her children who had followed Miracle's journey from the beginning. Mia Collins wore her hospital ID badge, having come directly from her shift at the trauma center. Officer Winters stood in uniform at the back of the crowd, her professional demeanor intact, but a rare smile visible as she watched the proceedings. The makeshift community forged through crisis had evolved into lasting connections. What happened to Miracle was an act of senseless cruelty, Dr. Reed told the gathered crowd during her brief speech. But what happened afterward? The response from strangers who stopped to help, from people who donated to his care, from everyone who shared his story and demanded justice, that represents the best of humanity. As if on cue, Miracle stretched and yawned widely, drawing laughter from the audience who had come to associate the orange cat with both dramatic survival and everyday feline nonchalance. The sanctuary itself stood as physical proof of Miracle's impact. What had begun as a modest rescue fund had grown into a state-of-the-art facility, designed specifically for animals recovered from abuse or neglect. The main building featured a veterinary clinic offering subsidized care, while outdoor enclosures provided safe spaces for rehabilitation. Each area was named after someone involved in Miracle's rescue: the Jeremy Rodriguez Intake Center, the Mia Collins Recovery Ward, the Officer Winters Protection Program for animals seized in cruelty cases. Lisa Parker, whose dashcam footage had been instrumental in both catching the perpetrators and sparking public interest in the case, now worked at the sanctuary as its media coordinator. Before Miracle, I was just a high school teacher who happened to have a dashcam, she explained to a reporter covering the opening. Now I help tell the stories of animals who can't speak for themselves. One viral video changed the trajectory of my life, but more importantly, it's changing the lives of hundreds of animals who come through these doors. Young Zachary Bennett, now 13 and considerably taller than he had been a year ago, had developed a volunteer program that brought middle school students to the sanctuary on weekends. The Compassion Corps, as the group was called, helped socialize recovering animals while learning about responsible pet ownership and animal welfare. It all started because I was making a video blog in the car, he told visitors, with the confidence of someone who had repeated the story many times. Then I saw something awful, but I also saw how people can come together to make things right. For Dr. Reed, the sanctuary represented a professional evolution she had never anticipated. While she maintained her veterinary practice, she now divided her time between treating regular patients and overseeing the rehabilitation programs at the sanctuary. Her expertise in trauma recovery had deepened through her work with Miracle, developing into specialized knowledge she now shared through workshops for other veterinarians. The quiet, work-focused life she had led before had expanded to include public speaking, fundraising, and advocacy, all inspired by one small orange cat. Miracle himself had settled into a routine split between being a beloved house cat in Dr. Reed's home and serving as the unofficial ambassador at the sanctuary. He seemed to have an uncanny ability to identify the most frightened animals, often choosing to sit quietly near the enclosures of recent rescues. Staff noticed that his presence had a calming effect on other animals, as if they somehow sensed that this confident, friendly cat had once been as traumatized as they were and had found his way to healing. As the opening ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Dr. Reed gathered Miracle into her arms for the short walk to her car. In the quiet moment between public celebration and private life, she found herself reflecting on the unlikely chain of events that had brought them together. One act of cruelty, witnessed by the right people at the right moment, had set in motion waves of compassion that continued to ripple outward, touching more lives than anyone could have imagined.